Hey everyone, I'm Haley. There are a ton of strategies out there for sleep training your child, and it can be confusing to know where to start. If you've talked to other parents about sleep training, you also know there's no shortage of opinions about which sleep training you should employ. So in this video, let's talk about some of the strategies you can use to get started on sleep training, and most importantly, talk about which one might be best for you and your little one. So the big question is, why do we even sleep train babies? Well, first off, it helps babies develop their internal clock and their own circadian rhythm so that they can fall asleep without your help. It starts to promote their own consistent time asleep at night, and they become more comfortable spending that time asleep. Sleep training allows a baby to develop their own self-soothing mechanism so that they can fall back asleep even if they wake up. At the end of it all, it helps them feel better during the day and increases their happiness because they're getting more consistent and effective sleep at night.
I just don't think there's any greater gift to give a kid than confidence in their sleep. And I think that parents help to mold that. If you approach sleep the right way with your kid, you can have lots of flexibility in it when they sleep and what their naps are. They're going to go to bed and they're going to sleep pretty consistently without a lot of angst and difficulty.
Now that we understand the why, the next big question is the when. When do we even start trying to sleep train?
Research would actually say you've started before the child's even born. There are studies that show that pregnant women who exercise at certain times of the day or drive, if you commute to work and drive every day, that the little baby growing inside of you is picking up on those cues. And you may be actually getting them sort of on a schedule before they're ever born. So, I think the answer is probably as soon as possible.
Now, some research says 6 months is a good time to start, while others encourage starting around 9 months when a baby may no longer need to eat at night. So you may not know when to start. It could be 4 months, it could be 9 months. If you begin to notice that your baby is starting to fall asleep on their own at night, that could be a sign that they're ready to start sleep training. The first method is called cry it out. This is definitely an old school method, but it's still one that a lot of parents swear by. The cry it out is also referred to as extinction or full extinction, and some might even shorten it to CIO. And it's exactly how it sounds. You're letting them cry themselves to sleep after you put them to bed. Now, before you let them cry themselves to sleep, you need to make sure your baby has eaten and is in a safe space. Then you can allow them to cry themselves to sleep at night and not intervene until either the next time they need to eat or until the morning. Now, this may seem tough, but with consistency, this can help promote self-soothing sleep habits in just a few days. And really, that's the point of this method, to give your babies the tools that they need to self-soothe themselves to sleep and not rely on parents to interject.
I would describe the cry it out method as a method or a parenting style where you're okay with a child being a little uncomfortable with the sleep situation, and you're going to allow the child to express that in terms of crying. Everybody sets parameters for their children. To me, sleep's no different. We don't want to create a fear-based sleep situation. We certainly want to punish kids for not falling asleep when you want them to as parents, but we want to do it with a thoughtfulness, an individual approach. We want to be kind about it. We always want to be supporting good education and ideas about sleep. When I often read things that sort of vilify the cry it out method, it's like you put your kid in bed and then you're just gone. Like you're just in there watching Succession or doing your own work or putting some groceries away, and your kid is just wailing in there. And I don't think anybody really thinks that's a good idea. So I think it's a perfectly fine strategy.
The next method is called the Ferber Method. This is also called graduated extinction or check and console. Now, this method involves setting a set amount of time that you will allow your baby to cry before you go in to check and console them. Now, this can happen multiple times with multiple interventions throughout the night, with longer wait times in between until your baby falls asleep and stays asleep. For instance, maybe you put your baby down to sleep and you let them cry for 5 minutes, and then you go console them. And then you wait 10 minutes before you console them, and then 15, and then you keep going until your baby falls asleep at night. Now, over time, the hope is that these intervals will become longer and that the time needed to console will become shorter until eventually your baby begins to self-soothe without you. So this method might take a little longer to fully sleep train your baby than the cry it out method, but it does show to significantly improve a child's sleep. However, one thing to note is if you notice that your baby becomes more awake or excited to see you when you're checking in on them, this might not be the method for you.
I think there's merit depending on your child about that, just that you're going to say, look, there's going to be a little bit of time. There's going to be a time gap there, but mommy or daddy or mommies and daddies, we always come in and kind of help you out there. And so I always liked the Ferber method and found that people had a lot of success with it.
Our third method is the fading method. This is also known as camping out. So this method can be helpful if you're starting to notice that your baby's body just isn't ready for bedtime at the time you're wanting them to go to sleep. For example, maybe you want them in bed by 8 p.m., but they just aren't ready. This is when you can use the fading method. It's used to modify a baby's circadian rhythm, so start to pay attention to their cues that they're getting tired. This includes rubbing their eyes, yawning, turning away from light and sound, and even getting fussier. These are all signs that a baby is getting tired. So once those cues hit, put them to bed. You can even stay in the room and provide a comforting presence without physically consoling them. The hope is that you're capitalizing on the natural time at which your baby is tired, and then they should fall asleep pretty quickly. If they don't fall asleep and are crying, take them out. Let those sleeping cues kick back in and then try again. Now the goal is to modify the baby's internal clock and circadian rhythm. So every night, start that process just a little earlier than the night before until your baby starts to show they're tired at the time you're wanting. Our final method we want to share with you is the no tears method, which relies on a consistent bedtime routine. This means doing the same bedtime activities in the same order at the same time each night, so that your baby can start to understand that bedtime is what comes next and that it is now time to sleep. But listen to your baby during this time. Though a routine is important, there's no need to make it rigid. You may need to make changes to the routine if your baby isn't responding. Overall, the hope is that your baby learns to fall asleep without any fussiness or crying because it becomes an anticipated and trained event that is happening. Regardless of which method you ultimately land on, here are 6 tips to keep in mind. First, the goal is to separate yourself from your baby and teach them to self-soothe. Second, regardless of which method you choose, just make sure you stick to a consistent bedtime routine. Babies thrive on routine, and sleep training is a great way to introduce a predictable schedule. Third, there's no right way to do this. What works best for you and your child, that's the right way. Fourth, prepare for some rough nights. This process won't go smoothly right away. Fifth, you and your child will ultimately get there, and it will get better. As your child grows and changes, they will need to make adjustments to their sleep schedule and routines. Think of training as an ongoing process.
We are sort of little CrossFit sleep trainers for our kids. So nobody's going to go to a gym where you get yelled at all the time, or you're being asked to lift weight that's dangerous, or you're not skill-wise prepared to do that kind of Olympic lift. You've never done it before. Like, you could really hurt yourself. So the purpose of the trainer is to look at you as an individual and figure out where your baseline situation is at and guide you in a way that's pushing you but not hurting you. And I think that's sort of the bottom line with sleep training. If you decide to do it, that we're just nudging kids day to day in a direction that's going to leave them in a place where their sleep is predictable and efficient. That's what everybody wants.
Remember, there is no one perfect method for every baby. You're going to get a lot of unsolicited advice about which method you should try, but be open to the way that works best for you and your child. Know that any method that gets you and your baby some rest will be a game changer. As always, head over to sleepfoundation.org for more helpful tips. And if you want to see how to get better sleep as a new mother, we have a video all about that right here. Thanks for watching, everyone. Sleep well.